albeit, albeit, albeit. Hello. So, you want to learn about albeit? Well, it's a pretty useful word in English. Albeit is actually an adverb, which means it modifies verbs. But it's often used with linking verbs like is, and, seem to indicate that something exists or happens despite another fact being true. Commonly, people use albeit to introduce the second part of a contrastive clause. For example, I love studying English, albeit my teacher can be tough sometimes. You'll often see it in formal writing like essays and academic papers, but it's not as common in casual conversation. One important thing to note is that albeit is typically used to indicate a general truth or condition, rather than a specific fact, so it wouldn't make sense to say, I ate a sandwich albeit I'm on a diet, because the two things aren't really compatible. And you're not just stating a general truth about being on a diet. Here are 3 examples of how to use the word albeit in different contexts. In formal writing, such as an essay or academic paper, albeit is used to introduce a concession or a counterpoint, while also adding emphasis to the main point. For example, despite the challenges we faced, our team was able to complete the project on time, albeit with some last-minute adjustments. This sentence shows how albeit is used to acknowledge a difficulty, but also highlight the team's ability to overcome it. In casual conversation, albeit is often used in a more relaxed tone to express a concession or a contrast. For instance, I'm not really into hiking, albeit my friends always try to convince me to join them on their next adventure. In this context, albeit is used to acknowledge that you're not interested in hiking, but also imply that your friends are trying to persuade you. In business or academic writing, albeit can be used to introduce a limitation or a caveat, while also adding nuance to the main point. For example, our new policy aims to reduce waste, albeit with some potential trade-offs in terms of increased costs and administrative complexity. In this context, albeit is used to acknowledge that there may be drawbacks to the policy, but still emphasize its overall goal and benefits. So, you want to learn about albeit? Don't worry if you're not familiar with this word yet, I'm here to help. Albeit is a special word that we use in English to show that despite something being true, there's also another thing that's even more important or interesting. It kind of means although, or despite the fact that, but it's used in a more polite and formal way. For example, I love reading books, albeit I don't have as much time as I'd like. In this sentence, we're saying that the person loves reading books, even though they don't have enough time for it, so albeit helps us connect those two ideas in a clear and nice way. Some other concepts or words that are similar to albeit are phrases like although, despite, or though. But albeit is used more specifically when we want to show a contrast or surprise. Like in the example I just gave you. Assemble, assemble, assemble. Let's take a closer look at the word assemble. As an English verb, it means to gather or bring together people, things, or parts of something in order to form a whole or create something new. For example, you might say, the team will assemble the furniture tomorrow, or the volunteers are assembling a charity event. Common usage includes using this word in contexts where things need to be put together, such as construction work, manufacturing, or even social gatherings like parties or meetings. One important note about its usage is that assemble often implies a more physical or tangible process. So if you're talking about bringing people together for an idea or discussion, You might want to use a different word like gather instead. The team will assemble in the conference room at 9 a.m. for today's project meeting, a formal usage. Where assemble is used to describe a group of people gathering for an official purpose. In contrast, I was trying to assemble this new bike from IKEA, but it seemed like every piece had about 5 different screws on it, making it really frustrating. A casual conversation usage where the speaker is using assemble to describe a more mundane and personal task. The production line will be modified to allow for faster assembly of the final product, reducing manufacturing time by 30%. A business or academic usage where assemble is used in a technical context to describe the process of combining parts into a complete whole. So, you want to know what to assemble means? Well, basically, when we say that something is being assembled, we're talking about bringing together different parts or pieces of something to make it whole and ready to use. For example, if you're building a piece of furniture from a set of instructions, you'll need to attach all the separate parts like legs, shelves, and drawers to create the final product. This process is really important in construction and manufacturing because it ensures that everything fits together correctly and safely. You might also hear people talking about putting something together or making something from scratch, which are similar ideas. They're all about taking individual parts and combining them into a cohesive whole. Collapse. 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 Let's talk about the word collapse. As a verb, collapse means to fall or become disorganized suddenly, often due to weakness or loss of support. In common usage, you might hear phrases like, the roof collapsed under the weight of heavy snow, or, her business empire began to collapse after she faced financial difficulties. Notice how collapse implies a sense of suddenness and instability. It's not just about something falling down, but also about it losing its strength or structure completely. Also, be aware that in informal contexts, you might see collapse used as a noun, referring to the state of being in such a condition. For example, the economy is on the verge of collapse. Here are 3 practical example sentences using the word collapse, along with their contexts. I was visiting my grandparents' house that had been vacant for a few months after they moved to a nursing home, and the living room's old couch suddenly gave way under the weight of their grandson's new video game system, causing it to collapse in a heap. In this context, collapse is used informally to describe an unexpected physical event. On a more formal note, in my research paper on structural engineering, I mentioned that the entire building had collapsed due to a faulty foundation, resulting in significant loss of life and property damage. Here, collapse is used formally to describe a catastrophic event with serious consequences, often requiring a high level of authority or expertise. At our quarterly meeting, our CEO warned the team about the market conditions, saying that if the company doesn't adapt quickly, its sales figures will collapse, which would be disastrous for the stock price. In this context, collapse is used in a business setting to describe an expected outcome with potentially negative consequences, requiring swift action from management and employees alike. So, you want to learn about this concept that means when something suddenly stops working or functioning properly, often because too much weight or stress is put on it. Imagine you're building with blocks, and then you keep adding more and more blocks until the tower can't hold them anymore. It suddenly gives way and all the blocks fall down. That's basically what we mean by this idea. It happens when something gets overwhelmed by its own weight or pressure, and it can't support itself any longer. You might see it in things like buildings, bridges, or even the human body if someone is under too much stress or strain. Some people also use words like give way or come crashing down to describe this idea. They all mean that something has reached its limit and can't keep going on anymore.